I'm a little late in posting today's message, but in our previous message, we talked about how Jacob was so fearful of his brother. And to reduce his fear, he was going to send his flocks, his droves of animals, by steps, so that his brother's anger that Jacob remembered from years ago would be assuaged, so that he'd be in a better mood. Well, in this message, we'll see how Jacob did this. And it reads from Genesis 32, verses 17 to 21. And he commanded the first drove, the foremost person in that drove, the lead hand, so to speak, of those servants. When Esau, my brother, meets with you and asks you, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, in this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when you find him. And also say, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me. And afterwards I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept me. So went the present over before him, and he himself lodged that night in the company. You see, this has to be taken as a whole unit. Can't just pick apart verse by verse, which was previously done. We read in verses 17 to 19 a display of Jacob's innovative strategy, as was mentioned previously. He sent out servants with each drove of animals at a considerable distance from each other to precede him in the eventual meeting with his brother Esau. That is exactly what I said yesterday. They would be meeting Esau first before Jacob would ever see him. And they would presumably be asked whose slaves they were, their destination, and whose drove of animals they were herding ahead of them. And each group leader of the slaves or servants herding the droves was to answer with the same answer. And that is, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that is going before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. You see, it was assumed by Jacob that Esau feared that Jacob was coming into Canaan to claim the prophesied sovereignty over him and to take his possessions from him. This is why Jacob thought he was bringing 400 men to prevent this from happening. Do you get that? So, Jacob, with his carefully measured speech from his servants and the gift of all those animals, was telling Esau first, there was nothing to fear from him. And second, he definitely wasn't in the least interested in any of Esau's possessions. Can you see that? My goodness, the gifts were so generous. And if Esau really was mad at Jacob, oh, wow. Yeah, he'd definitely get that message, wouldn't he? Furthermore, as was mentioned previously, Jacob was hoping that as Esau encountered each drove of animals as part of that big overall present that he was going to get. You know, he would probably be satisfied from drove after drove, so that finally his anger would disappear. Jacob actually was more interested, more concerned with God's sovereignty and God's marvelous provision. So went the present over before him, says the Bible in verse 21. And himself he lodged that night in the company, after sending the generous present out. That's the entire package of camels and donkeys and cows and bulls and goats and sheep. That was his present to Esau. After sending this generous present out, Jacob rested by staying behind to wait the results. At that point, it was no use worrying. Now it was time to leave everything in God's hands. I know today was a short message, and I'm asking you, the listener, do you spend too much time in fear and worry? Or have you also learned, leave the results with